Good evening, and thank you for this proclamation. March 7th, 1976 was an unusually warm spring day in Olympia, and Ralph and I were going sailing with some friends. Looking toward Budd Inlet, we saw a pod of orcas being chased by two large boats, a speedboat, and a seaplane. We knew it was the SeaWorld capture crew, which had already taken over 60 of our orcas and sold them to marine parks in the US and overseas. Our captain, Bill Oliver, tried to get his boat between the orcas and the capture boats, but the men swore at us, saying they had permits. The orcas tried to escape, but the seaplane taxied back and forth, and the men threw small explosives into the water. They drove the terrified animals into the shallow bay and threw nets around them. We were all very upset, but Ralph said, "We can't stop them, but we have to watch and remember everything they do. It may be important later." We watched as the men separated the young orcas from their family, prodding them with long poles. The orcas' cries were heartbreaking. The animals outside the nets did not leave, but kept circling around and calling to their captive relatives. That evening, Ralph and I decided to call friends in the press. The next morning, he exclaimed, "We've won round one. Mike Layton has just written a great story, and it's on page 1 of the PI." King TV came to Olympia and filmed the orcas in the net, and it became a big news story. Many people came to the harbor to protest the theft of our orcas. Ralph was on Governor Dan Evans' staff then, and he knew Attorney General Slade Gorton well. He contacted them, and they agreed to investigate. Gorton had 3 of his assistant AGs study the permit to find any provisions that were violated. They found a key one. The orcas were to be allowed to swim naturally and not be chased. Washington State filed a lawsuit against SeaWorld on March 10th. Both sides presented arguments at the federal courthouse in Seattle, with many orca supporters watching. The legal arguments went on for several days. SeaWorld had an army of lawyers and public relations people there. Our sailboat crew submitted affidavits about what we had seen. Once it seemed we had won, but SeaWorld won an appeal and the proceedings continued. However, SeaWorld personnel were worried about their public image. Negative information was coming out about previous captures, including the drowning of 4 young orcas they had tried to cover up. Finally, on March 23rd, SeaWorld signed an agreement that they would never capture orcas in Washington waters again, and the Budd Inlet captives would be set free. The courtroom erupted with joy. Thank you.